Again, my name is Sean Chadwick, and I'm an account manager with Workplace Safety and Prevention Services in our agricultural department specifically. So, welcome to today's Safety Connection webinar. And again, thank you to OFVGA to hosting us and providing this opportunity to share valuable insight and resources with some of our farms in the province. So today is part 3 of a 5-part series, navigating worker rights and understanding your responsibilities. Computer audio is recommended. You can teleconference in. Your microphone will be, again, remain muted while we are going through the presentation. If you do have a question, please raise your hand or type it in the chat, just so we can keep some uniformity as we go throughout today's presentation. And again, keeping your camera off unless you are speaking, just to minimize any distractions that we might have during today's session. Today's Safety Connection goals are pretty straightforward. It's to learn, share, and discover what is of value to you, our customers, and our community, to connect virtually with industry peers, and to facilitate a best practice exchange inside of the field. And to provide an opportunity, again, to learn more about duties and responsibilities and tackling challenging situations inside of the workplace. So on the agenda today, we're going to go through some basics to get started, reviewing the internal responsibility system. And then also how segueing into reinforcing worker responsibilities and how that relates to supporting worker rights. And sometimes those can be challenging. And so we're going to focus in on how do we properly train our workers in not only their responsibilities, also their rights, and so how we can mitigate conflict before it even arises. We're also going to explore some resources that will be available to you after today's presentation that will help you to continue to navigate some of the nuances of the law. Speaking of the law, anything that I talk about today is based off of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. As many of you know, agriculture came under this legislation back in 2006. And this is the foundational piece of health and safety legislation in Ontario. It sets out roles and responsibilities and legal authority and general principles for the workplace, such as employers, supervisors, workers, and inspectors, and the Joint Health and Safety Committee or health and safety representatives where applicable. These responsibilities must be carried out in accordance with the law to ensure the health and safety of everyone inside of the workplace. So inside of this, we also have regulations that may or may not apply to agriculture, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The Act is part of the overall Green Book that we've talked about, and there's detailed specific legislation for how work, training, and different nuances, again, in the law need to be carried out inside of the workplaces. So, as I mentioned, farming came underneath of the OHSA back in 2006, and it has its own unique regulation. Regulation 414. Section 4 sets out the application of legislation to farming operations within the province. Some other regulations that may apply to your organization are things like Regulation 297, which sets out the requirement for occupational health and safety awareness and training for workers and supervisors, including records of training. It also sets out the requirement for the Joint Health and Safety certification, training, and others. Regulation 381, noise, sets out the requirements for protecting workers from noise. If employers provide protective hearing devices, also employers must provide training on how to use those hearing protection devices. Regulation 420 sets out requirements for notification of events to the Ministry of Labor and your health and safety representatives and joint health and safety for things like critical injuries, notification requirements for motor vehicle incidents on a highway, electronic notification to the Ministry of Labor, 3-year record retention, and incident content requirements. Some other things that may apply to your organization may be naloxone kits in Regulation 559. Uh, this is a new one that's coming up in January of next year. Washroom facilities and records of cleaning. Construction projects, if you're building something on your farm, this may come into play. And also Ontario Regulation 1101 for first aid requirements. We'll touch on some of these as we go today. And again, these can be a little bit challenging to navigate. So if you do have questions surrounding this on your farm, we are always here to help you navigate, again, some of those complexities around the law and if something may or may not apply to your farming operation. So as we go today, the foundational building block of understanding is the Internal Responsibility System, or the IRS. This is really the foundation of health and safety law in Ontario. The Occupational Health and Safety Act that we just covered really sets out these responsibilities throughout the workplace. Employers and workers share responsibility for health and safety inside of the workplace. So it's not just one person's job. It's not just a supervisor's job. It's not just the employer or a worker's job. Everybody conducts roles and responsibilities inside of the workplace in order to keep the workplace healthy and safe. So employers ultimately are responsible for anything health and safety related that goes on inside of the workplace. This includes setting a safe environment, establishing a health and safety program and policies within the program, and is responsible for anything, again, health and safety related inside of the organization. Supervisors also have responsibilities to communicate, monitor, and enforce programs and policies set out by the employer. Workers also have responsibility to comply with, participate, and bring concerns to the attention of the employer. You'll also see on the right-hand side there the Joint Health and Safety Committee and Health and Safety representatives. These may or may not apply to your farm, and we'll go through how this helps in the discussion around navigating worker rights and responsibilities in a couple of slides, but they are not an enforcement body. They are there to monitor your system and make recommendations to the employer and support communication between parties. And again, we'll dive a little bit more into that in a few slides. But for the time being, this makes up the internal responsibility system, and it's the key foundation of understanding moving forward. So let's dive a little bit more into workers. What is a worker? So a worker is any of the following, but it does not include an inmate of a correctional institution or anything surrounding that. What we want to focus on today is a person who performs work or supplies services for monetary compensation. But it doesn't end there. This could be a secondary student, so someone in high school, who performs work or supplies services for no monetary compensation under a work experience program authorized by the school board that operates the school in which the student is enrolled. Translation, co-op. If someone is on your farm in a co-op role, they also are constituted as a worker. Also, a person who performs or supplies services for no monetary compensation under a program approved by a college. So again, this is maybe an internship, someone earning some sort of an accreditation. If they're not being compensated through monetary compensation, but they're there really for work skill sets, that person is also a worker. Such other persons that may be prescribed who perform work or supply a service to an employer for no monetary compensation. Again, this is getting into some of the nuances of the law. Really what you should be thinking about for a worker is anyone who is carrying out work on your site. These are your workers. And there could be some shared responsibilities as well, but again, we'll get into that a little later on. So when we're talking about workers, what are workers responsible for when it comes to the workplace? So workers, in general, must comply with the provisions of the Act and its regulations. Pretty straightforward. They are also responsible to use, wear the equipment or protective devices or clothing that you require to be used or worn. They are also responsible to report to you any absence or defect in equipment or a protective device which the worker becomes aware of that may endanger themselves or another worker. And also to report to you, the supervisor or employer, any contravention of the Act and its regulations which they are aware of. Additionally, no worker can remove or make ineffective any protective device required by the regs or their employer without providing an adequate temporary protective device when the need for removing or making ineffective the protective device has ceased, and the protective device shall be replaced immediately. So, translation on that one, the only people that should be removing a protective device should be someone who is trained to do so. And after something is put in place to ensure the safety of themselves and other workers. This could be something like a lockout tagout procedure or other means when a protective device is removed for something like maintenance, repair, etc. No worker may also operate equipment, machine, or device or work in a manner that may endanger themselves or any other worker, and engage in any prank, contest, feat of strength, unnecessary running, rough, or boisterous conduct. Um, Again, pretty straightforward, and this applies to anyone in the workplace who, again, receives some sort of compensation while carrying out work. So this also includes your supervisor. A manager on site is also a worker under the Act, but they have additional responsibilities as we saw in the last slide. So workers do not just have duties, they also have three basic rights in the province of Ontario. These rights are the right to know about job-related hazards and how these hazards can harm them. That's very important to remember. It's not just saying to someone, careful, this could hurt you. It's also saying, careful, this could actually lead to maybe an amputation. This could lead to a crushing injury or a tractor rollover. It's important to notify people how they can be affected, not just that they can be affected. It's also important to tell and inform workers how to control hazards appropriately. So if things like personal protective equipment are required when working around a certain area, different training, and so on, it's important to educate your workers on these. The right to participate. This is part of being a part of the process of recognizing, assessing, and controlling hazards. A really good way to do this is by being a health and safety rep or a member of the Joint Health and Safety Committee for applicable farming operations. We'll talk a little bit more about this a little later on. Also, the right to refuse unsafe work. Workers have the ability to refuse work they believe puts themselves or another worker in danger. There is defined procedures to do this that must be carried out, including informing you, the employer or supervisor, and the supervisor or employer must investigate the situation to put controls in place. Again, we'll go in depth in a few slides on this. Now, what is a really good way to ensure that workers know their responsibilities and also their rights? Is training. Effective training is the foundation of any health and safety system in any workplace in the province. And in fact, it is also regulated. Ontario Regulation 297-13 requires that employers ensure that workers are complete a basic occupational health and safety awareness training program and maintain and provide records of that training. This enforcement began in 2014. This includes basic training supports for vulnerable workers and those who are considered to have a greater exposure than most workers to conditions hazardous to health and safety and who lack the power to alter those conditions. So someone who's maybe not maintenance, again, talking about if something is defective or something like that, what are some of the training that you need to educate your worker on? Should they be operating something? Should they not? Who do they tell if something is defective? Those are all things that should be included in training for all workers. It's also important that you maintain the records of any training that is carried out. There's something in the safety world that we say, if it's not documented, it never happened. Making sure that you indicate what a worker was trained on, when, meaning the date that they were trained, and that they understood the training through something like a basic test or a practical test or evaluation, is vital to your record keeping. Um, Again, a certification of completion, maybe if you do third party training, but it's important that you keep those records on file. Again, it needs to be dated, signed, and have some sort of indication of what was covered inside of the training. This is especially important when
John,
we're talking about, oh,
John, can I just jump in? Sorry, I
yes.
don't know if you covered it. Does it need to be done every year?
So we will cover that in a moment.
Okay, wonderful.
All right. So when we're talking about who needs to be trained, new and young workers are the most at risk of being injured inside of your workplace. New and young workers are likely more, sorry, are 3 times more likely to be injured in their first 90 days. And 40% of all injuries in the province occur in the first 3 to 6 months of someone's employment. Most often, this is because a worker is inexperienced. They have Superman syndrome, which I like to call it, meaning that they believe everyone expects them to know how to do everything right away. They copy the work of behaviors of their coworkers, good or bad, and they don't know about the hazards and what to ask. So going off of what Stefan just pointed out, training should be completed before a worker begins work. Again, part of this is not just to ensure the safety of worker, but also creating compliance within your organization and limiting your legal liability. And off of, again, Stefan's point, there is something inside of the Occupational Health and Safety Act that you should be thinking of called the General Duty Clause, which states that an employer and supervisor need to take every precaution reasonable to protect workers from harm. A really great way to show due diligence and that you are doing everything reasonable under the circumstances is to complete in-depth training. Again, this is a foundational block of occupational health and safety in the workplace. Um, so, who should you be training and when? That depends. Um, Content must include the following: the duties and rights of workers under the Occupational Health and Safety Act that we just covered, the duties of employers and supervisors under the Act, the roles of the health and safety representative and joint health and safety committee, if applicable, the roles of the Ministry of Labor, Immigration Training and Skills Development, uh, Workplace Safety Insurance Board or WSIB, and designated health and safety associations like WSPS. It should also cover common workplace hazards that you have inside of your workplace. Requirements set out by Regulation 860, Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System, WMIS, with respect to information and instruction on hazardous products. Again, farms may not fall underneath of this specific regulation. However, if you do have different maybe pesticides or chemicals on site, your workers should be trained on how to safely use, handle, and store these materials and what to do in the event of an emergency. And they should also have direct access at all times to SDS sheets for these types of chemicals. Uh, Also, workers need to be trained on occupational illnesses, including latency periods. Workers need to, again, be trained before they start work on these areas. If you have a worker, let's say for seasonality sake, or someone left on paternal or maternal leave, or they are a rehire, people should be refreshed before they go into the workplace. You may not go in depth with someone who's returning year after year after year, but if you do have any changes in your health and safety system, it's always a good idea to refresh them on the aspects of your health and safety system before sending them back out into the workplace. This is also if someone violates a health and safety component within your system, there should be some sort of retraining to reestablish that the worker is, in fact, understanding the training that you have been providing to them. So, although this may be a one time thing for training, you're going to continually coach and administer your program within your farm when workers are maybe deviating, but also providing affirmation when a worker is doing what they need to. You're not just focusing on when someone makes a mistake, you're also giving them praise when they are following the procedure. So, in covering things under the know, meaning that your workers have the right to know, an area that a lot of farms miss is sometimes they'll just send a person through the four step that's available through the Ministry of Labor. However, it's important that you educate workers on hazards that are specific to your farming operation. When we are talking about this, there are 6 types of hazards that are in every workplace in the province of Ontario. These include physical, things like noise, vibration, temperature, and radiation. Physical hazards are harmful energies that you might not be able to see but can still affect you. Biological. These are things that can cause disease or infections in living organisms, including humans. Things like bacteria, viruses, blood, poison ivy, farm animals, etc. Chemical, including things like paint, oil, herbicides, etc. MSD, force, repetition, posture, and things that occur over time with repetition. MSD or musculoskeletal disorders are hazards which have a mismatch between a worker and the force or repetition needed to complete their task. This is the most common type of injury related hazard in the province of Ontario. This constitutes about 40% of all injuries in the province. Psychosocial. These are things that affect your mental well being, things like harassment, violence, pressure, stress, and so on. Safety is really everything else. It's the catch basin in our environment for things that we use to complete a task or the environment itself. Things like slips, trips, and falls, vehicles, machinery, and tools. It's important that you educate workers on the different types of hazards that are in your workplace and how to keep themselves safe and those around them safe when working with these hazards. Again, as mentioned, training can be delivered through face to face, through workers using a workbook, such as seen on the screen. This can be done also electronically through e learning modules, again, provided by the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, and Skills Development through their 4 step program for your workers. However, this does not complete all of the training. Remember to educate your workers on any specifics within your organization, such as hazards, reporting, and where to find out more information. A really effective tool that WSPS has created is the Orientation Handbook Generator. In as little as about 20 to 30 minutes, you can create an entire onboarding package for your workers, complete with specific hazards, controls, and policies for your workplace. You can find out more on WSPS.ca or by scanning the QR code on the screen to find out more. Again, this is a really effective way to start the conversation around getting everyone trained and documenting things on your farm. So let's take a break for a moment. We've just kind of covered talking about hazards. Do workers report these hazards to you in your workplace? Stefan, I'm not sure if we have the poll available.
Why don't we try it?
Yep, the poll came up.
Okay, good.
All right. So, answer that first question there. Do workers report at your workplace? Yes or no? Do you have a method that workers can report things in your workplace? Or is it kind of just at a conversation? So go ahead. We'll take a few moments there um, to record those answers. All right. So it looks like most of you in that have answered that workers are reporting. That's great. One thing to remember is if someone is reporting, is it documented? Again, this is a great way to show due diligence and showing that you are doing, again, that general duty clause of doing everything reasonable under the circumstances to ensure the safety of your workers. So great job, everyone. And we'll continue on here. There are some other questions that we'll answer in a little bit. All right. So the second part of worker responsibilities inside of the workplace is participating. Every employee has the right to participate in workplace health and safety by helping identify and resolve health and safety issues. This could be things like asking health and safety related questions, making health and safety suggestions to a joint health and safety committee or health and safety rep, reporting dangers or hazards in the workplace, participating in workplace inspections and providing information and answering questions, seeking membership to join the health and safety committee or become the health and safety representative as a worker inside of the workplace. So speaking of that, when is a joint health and safety committee or a health and safety representative needed inside of a workplace? So in general, if a farming operation has 6 to 19 employees, a health and safety uh, rep is required. A joint health and safety is only required if there are 20 or more workers who are regularly employed related to mushroom farming, greenhouse farming, dairy farming, hog farming, cattle farming, or poultry farming. The Joint Health and Safety Committee is an advisory body, again, that helps stimulate awareness of issues in your workplace and recognizes workplace hazards and then deals with those risks as they arise.
Sean,
Uh, yeah,
can
go
I
ahead.
can I just hammer home a point for
Yeah,
anyone who's I like to just be really clear on this one so we don't get people panicking. If you don't
absolutely.
operate a greenhouse, then the only thing that you'll ever be required to have is a health and safety rep.
Correct. Absolutely. All farming operations, again, based off of your point there again, with more than 6 employees, is again, you're only going to be concerned about a health and safety representative. One question that we get a lot is how do I count how many people I have employed? So regularly employed means the number of workers, whether they're permanent, full-time, seasonal, temporary foreign worker, contract, etc., that exceed 90 days. So as long as someone is working more than 90 days in your farm, they are considered part of your head count. If they're only there for 2 months, they're not a part of your official head count when it comes to an HSR or if you're in greenhousing for your joint health and safety committee. Okay. So again, this is a really great way though, when you have an effective health and safety representative, that it's part of that teamwork. It's not just on you, it's not just on the supervisor or other workers. An effective health and safety rep can really help you identify different areas so that you are more proactive than reactive on your farm. So your health and safety rep, they conduct monthly workplace inspections. They assist in identifying workplace hazards and make recommendations to you. They are present to assist a worker in the for the investigation of a work refusal, which we'll cover in a moment. They may inspect the workplace where there's been a critical injury or, God forbid, a fatality. and report findings to the Ministry of Labor. They can provide feedback on workplace violence and risk assessments and your chemical control program. Obtain information about hazards in your workplace. Obtain information about health and safety related tests, such as if you did like noise sampling or some hygiene testing on your farm. They are able to access those documents. Request information from the WSIB about the company's injury claims history, and accompany a Ministry of Labor inspector during a site visit when requested. So again, your HSR is really your safety ambassador, and facilitates concerns not just from the worker to the employer, but also facilitates communication between all three workplace parties. When someone is conducting monthly inspections, this is a great way, again, to identify things before they become a concern on your farm. They prepare for monthly inspections, and they inspect the different areas of your farm. When they are doing this, they should plan out a route and areas of focus. And again, this should be documented. They must be given an opportunity to observe employees performing the work so that they can identify if there's any hazards that maybe people aren't seeing. They are allowed to ask questions. They can also conduct inspections in pairs. Again, this is a good practice because, again, we all see the world differently and we might pick up on things that others are missing. They also prepare reports, including a list of any deficiencies that they see. And they also may identify a hazard that merits a formal inspection if it's a repeated issue. So getting you involved as the employer or supervisor if there's something that keeps on coming up that's not being addressed inside of the workplace. They also have the ability to put recommendations forward to you through a formal recommendation process in which you have 21 days to respond to in writing. We're not going to go too far into information on this. It's not a common occurrence, but they do have the ability to make that response to you. And you don't have to comply with it, but you do have to tell the HSR why or why not you will be going forward with their recommendations. So things that the safety rep or joint health is not responsible for: developing and implementing your safety program. That is your responsibility as the employer. Delivering training, disciplining workers, or policy or enforcing safety rules. Again, they make recommendations. They are not an enforcer inside of the workplace. Deciding what actions to take to resolve a work refusal. Again, they're there just to monitor the process. Recognizing every workplace hazard or dangerous situation. Again, it's a team effort, not just on one person. And ensuring that recommendations are implemented when they do arise. So if this seems a little bit overwhelming, not to worry. We do have training that is available for your health and safety reps. This is not, I want to stress this, a legal requirement, but it is a good practice and will be very beneficial to your workplace if you have a health and safety rep that is knowledgeable of what their powers, duties, and responsibilities are inside of the workplace. Using that HSR can be a critical tool inside of the workplace to keep your workplace healthy and safe. And also to eliminate any confusion of what their role and responsibility is inside of the workplace. We also provide joint health and safety certification for those that applies to. Again, I want to stress, unless you are a greenhouse, that does not apply to you. We also have documentation to help you catalog hazards, risk assessments, and we also have policy documentation templates to help you navigate the nuances of the law and stay in compliance. We are always here to help you for any of your safety related needs. So let's go back to the poll. How do workers report at your workplace? Again, this is an important question. So take a second just to think about this. How does someone report if there is a hazard, if there's an injury, if there's an emergency, or they have a general concern about the workplace? Do you have a standardized process for workers to follow? And if you do, Have workers been trained on how to do that? This is an important aspect of your health and safety program inside of your workplace. And I see Stefan has joined us again. Stefan. Oh, just the poll. All right. So, question number two. How do your workers report at your workplace? Through their supervisor, to the owner, anonymous, or another means? So let's give a couple seconds on that.
Yeah, and everyone online, please forgive me for I I didn't think strategically that I would need to do each question as a separate poll. So you can just jump down to the question that we're at the time,
Thank you
and
so
we'll
much,
figure it
Stefan,
out
for
for
that.
next time. Yep.
All right. So it looks like most go to the supervisor, which is great, or the owner. Again, we want to make sure, and this is something that I used to see all the time. Workers would go tell maintenance, but they wouldn't tell their supervisor that something's broken. You really want to enforce how and when your workers report things, or you're not going to be given the chance to fix something potentially. Um, Also, making sure that this is documented. Something that I was told again in the safety world, paper never forgets. I don't know about you, but when I would walk through the farm, when I was frontline health and safety, I would have 20 people come up to me about 20 different problems. So even just having a notepad handy to write things down goes a long way so that you can follow up on different things that come up. Again, standardizing that process is extremely important so that things don't fall through the cracks because they will. Um, Farming, you need way more than 24 hours in a day, and we all only get the 24. So, again, making sure that this is as streamlined and easy to follow as possible will help you in the long run. So, again, it looks like most people, about 80%, to the supervisor or owner, and that's great to see. So, the last right that we're going to talk about here is the right to refuse. And this is sometimes something that causes a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of um, uh, fear around when this happens. And really, if a worker completes a work refusal, that's actually a really good sign inside of your workplace that workers know what to do if there is a serious hazard inside of the workplace. Work refusals are not something to be scared of. This shows that your system is working. If you never have anyone bringing anything to your attention, that should be a red flag because even the best safety systems in the world are not perfect. I always tell people there's no such thing as a perfect safety program. You're always growing. So reporting is not a bad thing. Reporting is a good thing because it gives you the opportunity to make changes inside of your organization should the need arise. So for a work refusal, if a worker believes that work is dangerous, they must tell their supervisor or employer that they're not going to complete the work and why. It's not just enough for a worker to come and say, well, it just feels unsafe. Well, what is the reason for that? And that's why it's so important that you train workers on what hazards are and how they can be impacted so they know whether or not something is something for a work refusal grounds. Okay, so we want to get out in front of this before it even comes up. At any point where the worker has told you this, the worker again has told the supervisor that they feel unsafe. The worker will stay in their workstation or in a safe place, maybe away from the situation should the need arise. And at this point, the supervisor needs to tell, again, the Joint Health and Safety Committee, for those that that's applicable to, or the health and safety rep. They're there to observe the process. They're not there to bully anything. Again, they're there to recommend and facilitate clear communication. Okay. The employer or supervisor can usually, once you have investigated, fix the solution. If you can fix the solution, and it's agreed upon that by the worker, the HSR, and the supervisor that yes, this is now safe to continue, then the worker returns to work. There's no additional steps other than just documenting what has occurred. However, if the worker is not satisfied and still has reasonable grounds to believe that the work is still unsafe, at this point, the worker continues to refuse and stays in a safe place, and the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, and Skills Development would be notified. At that time, the inspector would investigate in consultation with the worker, the supervisor, and the HSR. If the Ministry of Labor inspector sees that there is still clearly issues with the work, then they would issue orders to correct the issue. However, I have also seen situations where if the Ministry of Labor inspector sees that there is no reasonable grounds for a continuation of a work refusal, they can also issue a back to work order for the worker. Okay. So again, this part of the facilitation is why it's so important of we really don't want to get to this point and we want to do everything within our power to ensure that controls are in place to ensure the safety of a worker. Okay. Um, Now, during this process, what's very important to remember is that we do not reprise on an individual. What does that mean? It means that an employer has punished a worker for acting in compliance with the law or its regulations. This means firing or threaten to fire, disciplining or threaten to discipline or suspend, imposing a penalty on a worker, intimidating or coercing a worker to go back to work when they have brought up a work refusal. Again, we want to stay far away from this. One thing that you can do is ask questions to find out more about why the worker has the concern and work together as a team to facilitate what controls can we put in place. Do things need to be put in place now? Um, is there temporary things that we can do until a more permanent solution can be found? And what you're trying to do as a team is find out the best way to move forward. Again, this is why training on all of these principles is very important so that no one is misunderstanding what their job is inside of these moments. And so that clear information can be, again, communicated to all workplace parties so that you don't get to this point. Um, So again, some of the most common reasons that the Ministry of Labor is showing up for workplace site inspections, the one of the number one is again the health and safety awareness training and non-compliance in that area. So making sure that our training is compliant is very important. Another one is violence and harassment, making sure that you are compliant in that area on your farm. Other things, material handling, posting materials, maintenance of equipment, housekeeping, failure to take reasonable precautions, and machine guarding. Again, there will be some nuances surrounding this, depending on your type of operation. I'm going to skip that one and go to why might workers be reluctant to report at your workplace? This is a big one. So scroll all the way to the bottom. Um, are
Yeah, it's question 4.
Yeah, question four. Are workers unclear how to? Fear of reprisal? They don't want to, or they really don't have a concern? Or is there maybe some other reasons that you have found? Okay, we'll give another couple minutes here. All right, seeing lots of answers come in, which is great. All right, we're seeing answers across the board, which is really good for having this conversation. All right, so Based off what's come in, most don't want to, or they don't really have a concern, or don't think it's that big of a deal. The next closest one is fear of reprisal, fear of getting in trouble. Unclear how to, or some sort of other mechanism. So this again is why it's so important that we train workers before they start working to eliminate some of this inside of our workplace, because underreporting can cause injuries in the workplace. Um, 21% of workers in the province have reported experiencing at least one lost time injury in their careers, and 50% of that did not report the injury. So things that don't go reported, again, unaware of the need to report injuries, perceived a low severity of the injury, negative reactions from others, ambiguity about whether the injury was caused from work, concerns regarding self identity, lack of understanding, and long term impacts. So, again, when you're going through this process, you want to support reporting. Reporting is not a bad thing. Reporting allows you to fix the problem so it doesn't become a larger issue. People do report to you, avoid discussions of blame. Investigate all incidents, even if you think it's small, and avoid incentives for a injury or no lost time streaks. The reason for this is people might go, you know what, we've gone 200 days without a lost time injury. I'm just not going to report and I'm just going to kind of suck it up so that we don't lose that streak. It can actually cause a detriment to your workplace counting those streaks. So a lot of people do have those boards up. They can actually be negative to your health and safety program. Make internal forms easy and simple to use, especially for your supervisors. We do have templates online that I'll share again after today's session. So again, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Educate about workplace illnesses that come over time. Again, you want to educate your workers on what is a workplace injury, what's not a workplace injury. One of the things we used to tell our workers as well is that they will probably be sore the first couple days of work. And that's called work hardening. That's actually a healthy response of the body. It doesn't mean you're injured. So it's even important to educate workers on what we might think is, well, everyone should know this, depending, especially if you have workers coming from multiple areas of the globe. Not everyone might be on the same page. And it's important that you get everyone on the same page about what is acceptable, not acceptable, and common inside of your workplace. Um, Make sure that you establish and reinforce workplace reporting norms. You can even bring it up at a tailgate talk or a safety talk before a shift starts. And also encourage reporting near misses. Those near miss incidences where something could have happened, it didn't, but it almost happened where it could have caused an injury in the workplace. Those are, again, those proactive measures that you can take to ensure the safety of your workers. Again, how do we do this practically? Lead by example. If you're an owner, walking through and asking questions even to your supervisors of how are things going? Are there any concerns? That type of one-to-one interaction goes a long way of changing your safety culture. Assigning mentors or job shadowing is another big way to change your workplace culture to make sure people don't feel alone or are unsure about how to do something their first couple days of work. Catch people working safely and make sure to praise that. Don't just focus on the negatives, focus on the positives. Clear inclusion of health and safety behaviors in your code of conduct. Even doing safety pledges for workers or supervisors, making sure that your reporting is simple. Even things like rewarding people for reporting a hazard or having some sort of a safety draw can go a long way in changing your safety culture. As mentioned, we have a lot of resources that are designed specifically for agriculture and horticulture in our Ag and Horticulture Safety Center, as well as our Small Business Center. This again includes that handbook generator to keep everything in one place and make things simple for your onboarding. Additional resources can be found on our website. And if you are a workplace with 20 or less employees, we offer up to 10 hours of free health and safety consulting if you have more questions or maybe just want a second set of eyes on things inside of your farm. Again, we have free resources and we can help. We have complimentary consulting, like I just mentioned, and also we can do free walkarounds for any farm that has more than 20 employees. We provide training and certification, and we can also provide health and safety excellence program rebates when implementing this on your farm. And we'll have another session on that in just a few months, so make sure to tune in for that one as well. So I do want to open it up for the last 10 minutes for any questions that we might have. I know we covered a lot of ground today, but again, this will be recorded, so I'll open that up again.
Thanks, Sean. And just to clarify with the consulting, it's funded by Ministry of Labor or a funding mechanism that's provided by Ministry of Labor. Is that correct?
Yep, so that's funded as part of your prepaid through WSIB and the Ministry of Labor.
Okay.
Um, so again, there is that free consulting for 20 or fewer employees, up to 10 hours. And then we can also do site walkarounds at no charge and just have a conversation about maybe some things that you might have a concern about or maybe aren't seeing, and we can have a larger discussion.
Great. Thanks, Sean. We've got a question from Sarah in the chat. She's asking, can you please clarify if Regulation 480 24 only pertains to construction sites at this time? And if it is applicable to farms, does it apply to washrooms in worker housing? There's been some confusion on what workplaces it pertains to.
Okay, so let's go back to 480. Give me one moment here.
And it is a good question, Sarah. I know it was one of our points in our submission to Ministry of Labor that we didn't want it to sort of invade the privacy of the workers.
All right, so Ontario regulation of washroom facilities and records of cleaning. So um, specifically around that. So let's go back into here. Sorry, just trying to navigate this. We were here. I'll stop sharing. That's better. So when we're talking about the new regulation that is coming out in the beginning of January, the record keeping is going to come into effect for farming regulations. Um, the Ministry of Labor has not provided a full understanding of it yet. However, when they do, we will provide OFEGA with information surrounding that for the interpretation of the new legislation that is coming out. So this was something that was recently passed. But again, we're waiting on the full understanding from the ministry. When we do have that, we will share that out with you. There are a lot of questions when it comes to new legislation and how it's going to be implemented. But from what we can tell, again, the thought process around this legislation, from what I can tell so far, was born out of COVID. And are we regularly providing cleaning and things like toilet paper, soap, things like that in our washrooms if we have them? Um, and so, as far as is it going to be applied to farming? Yes. How is it being applied? To be determined, again, because some farms may or may not have washrooms available immediately, like especially for something like a field or something like that. So there is going to be some nuances. I know that's not a great answer, but we are still waiting on complete clarification from the ministry.
And it's probably appropriate that you don't venture into the gray zone of going beyond what the government has issued. I'll add, Sarah, that based on the conversations we've had, worker housing will be out of scope of the
Yes.
regulation, and it will be kind of standalone porta potties kind of arrangements that will be the focus of the regulation.
Yeah, when we're talking about the regulation, this does not apply to your temporary foreign worker housing. That's kind of out of scope. I mean, there is some stuff with Are you doing inspections and things like that for like fire code and stuff like that? That's again a whole other topic around the TFW program federally, and maintaining a safe and healthy living space for workers where applicable. But we're specifically talking about the application being in the workplace, not venturing into housing.
Sean, is there a way to get kind of the side with the worker refusal process kind of extracted as a standalone? I think the deck would be helpful to share. I think that poster would be helpful to share, and it got me thinking that it would be a process that's worth sharing with people that share our interest in the worker well-being at the Jamaican liaison and maybe the Mexican consulate to sort of highlight at what point would initially it's problem solving before you kind of bring down the hammer and go down to the Ministry of Labor level. So I think of that problem solving where you're using kind of communication to resolve things. And I think that's maybe a process even worth highlighting to our friends in those two offices, um, because we don't want to
Yeah,
bring in the Ministry of Labor if we don't need to.
exactly. And again, I want to stress that this is why it's so important to have that training beforehand so that people aren't making decisions based on, I simply didn't know the process, so I'm just reaching out to someone who's familiar to me. Again, just as human beings, we try to avoid things that are uh, maybe where there's fear involved, or if we don't know how to do something, or we're unfamiliar with something, you're going to avoid it. And so, if you can really get in front of that before a situation arises through effective training, you're going to avoid a lot of those conversations and miscommunications beforehand. So that's why it's so important that you do invest the time to have these. And to your point, Stefan, we will have anything that we've talked about today. We'll have resources in a follow-up that we'll share with OFEGA. That poster that you did see on the work refusal is a standalone resource that we do have.
Perfect.
So we can share that, as well as links to some of the templates, the onboarding resources that I covered today, and also the Ministry of Labor 1234 training. I can provide resources to all of that. As well, I do want to mention both the resources for the Ministry of Labor does have multiple languages available, and we also have some training resources on our website that I'll link as well that are available in multiple languages, including Spanish, Thai, Vietnamese, and so on.
It's a lot of food for thought. I mean, thank you for that stimulating presentation. That's
Absolutely.
very interesting. Any questions? Any final questions? I know lunch break for most people is going to be up now. I'll leave it open for another 15 seconds or so, but I want to thank everyone already for tuning in, and we'll be running our next event in a few weeks. I believe it's on the 29th, and to be hitting people's inboxes in the coming days. I see no other questions. I'm going to stop the recording. And thank you again, Sean, for taking the time to explain that to us.
Absolutely.
Bye, everyone.